So my name is Brett Pierce. I am not a decision guy, okay? This is not my field. My background is actually working for 20 years with Sesame Workshop, the Sesame people. So I'm kind of a media creator, I'm a producer, and I'm an educator. I do some teaching at Colby College in Maine, which is where I'm from. But my training has been in this idea of here's a curricular idea, and let's create a media story around it in order to engage our audience. And there we go, beautiful. So that's what I'm gonna come at this from a very different angle, not from an angle of like I'm in love with decision skills, okay? Because I'm actually in love with media and telling stories through media. But I was, through Robin Gregory, allowed to actually work with some decision skills people, and I'm here to propose a marriage. Okay, so the objective is to figure out how to bring the decision sciences into formal education successfully and with the promise of scale. And to me, this is kind of about with the promise of scale, because I'm hearing a lot of very beautiful stories about a school here and a person there and 140 kids there and stuff like that, but this has got to go somewhere. Okay, and that's hopefully, I want to offer one potential solution into that possibility. The why. I'm going to have to get really close to read this. Okay, so I don't know why this is important. I mean, I kind of do, obviously, but I asked people that do. So I asked, I asked Carl Spetzler, why is this important? And his answer was, making good decisions leads to better lives and a better world, and the necessary decision skills can be learned and must be learned. I love that phrase, must be learned. He's like, boom. Okay, because they just don't come naturally. Chris, making good decisions is a central skill in leading a successful life. Students and educators value decision skills because they help them to be more confident and more effective. I buy all of it. Robin Gregory, my kind of partner who was just mentioned by Chris. Kids live in a world of imposed rules, formal and informal, expressed and implied. It may seem like they don't have many real choices, but it's not true. In ways large and small, kids have personal and collective choices about what to do, how, and with whom. We want and need them to be able to think through things on their own in a reliable and intelligent way. So you've got three kind of decision science people that are like, gotta have it. Gotta have it. And the stories that we've kind of already heard today attest to that. But we've got some huge obstacles. This is about trying to get decision sciences into formal education. Okay, that's kind of the challenge I was given in this discussion. And there's a problem here, okay? Formal education is not centrally controlled. Okay, so you have to go district by district, school by school, state by state. It is deeply invested in its traditional curricula. Okay, there's whole economies around history, around language arts, around STEM. Okay, and it is currently oversubscribed. Okay, meaning that schools are now serving much wider purposes than just teaching the traditional curricula. And to give you an example of how kind of oversubscribed it is and how deeply invested it is and how it's so difficult, computer sciences. Computer sciences are, from what I understand, the research says that they are the #1 job opportunity out there, and yet only 23 states have actually mandated computer science being taught in schools. And there's a huge organization, Code.org is one of them, behind pushing computer sciences in school. We don't have that behind decision sciences. Okay, media literacy, another one. We all intuitively know how important media literacy has got to be to kids with disinformation and misinformation and our digitization of life. And yet only one state, and it was as of June of this year, has mandated a media literacy course, and that's the state of Illinois, for high schoolers. So decision science skills are kind of at the bottom of the pile there. We can all agree how important they are, but to get into the formal education system is really, really challenging. So some possible solutions. Introduce it through a life skills approach. This is what DEF has done, and with some success. And we heard stories about this kind of through the 6th grade and the 9th grade, and they've got a community college thing, which I think we're going to hear a little bit more about this afternoon. This is a good approach. Introduce it through narrative, radio dramas, TV series, YouTube videos, case studies. Not really a viable solution for the US, but this is the #1 solution internationally. One of the things that I do is I work on creating stories for youth in the developing world whereby we model behaviors with our characters that we want our audience to pick up on. And decision-making is always one of those curricular goals. So that in where I'm working right now is the Kakuma Refugee Camp in Kenya, a lot of South Sudanese, Somalians, Congolese. We did some research that showed that 17% of the youth, and youth being defined here as kind of 18 to 35, okay, 70% of the youth felt that they had control over their well-being. 17. The majority said their families had control, and then the international organizations. The point being, within that particular community, they had no agency. They felt they had no agency. And yet our funders, which was a German funder in this case, was like, there's all sorts of opportunities. There's all sorts of stuff, but they believe they cannot make their own decisions. So we create stories where characters are making decisions and being explicit about it, so that this idea of making a decision kind of rises to the surface and there's an awareness of it. And the third solution is integrated through existing entrenched curricula, language arts, history, STEAM. I have a feeling, yeah, this is going to go through it again. I just couldn't figure out how to reanimate that. There we go. What's the answer? All three. Anybody that's in the kind of the world of behavior change knows that you cannot come up with one strategy to change behavior. Okay, you've got to have a media side, and you've got to have just all sorts of different angles coming at you with don't drive drunk, or juuling is bad. Okay, you've got to hear it from numerous sources. And decision skills and education would also have to come at educators from numerous sources. But what I want to talk about is this last one, is formal curricular integration, which also is going to lead into this kind of life skills approach, this approach about decision-making to develop my own identity, which is a very viable thing, but again, not a curricular area in schools, formally. I believe that digital storytelling is, which is kind of what I do, is part of the answer here, okay? And why? First, what is digital storytelling? It is a new literacy. Okay? If you think about where kids are getting their information, they are getting it from YouTube. YouTube is like an Alexandrian library. It's bigger than the New York Public Library. It's bigger than the Bodleian Library at Oxford. It is like where all information is for kids. So, and this goes with TikTok. It goes with all sorts of other layers of kind of video out there. But it's where they go to figure stuff out. But are we training them to produce content for this library? Okay, and I would say, not so much, okay? It's also an education equity tool in the sense that the command of the English language is often the barrier to success educationally. But if you are learning to communicate with these tools, text, music, sound, and imagery, that's what digital storytelling is, then you've got a whole wide variety of tools with which to effectively communicate, as opposed to just mastering your native language. This is a vital life skill to succeed because you need to be digitally fluent. I don't need to defend that or explain that. We all know that. Okay, that has to do with media literacy, but also has to do with being able to kind of create and communicate effectively. And that's what employers are looking for. It's an important skill. If you're going to hire someone who can wow, you can create a video and embed it in the PowerPoint and make it all fly, you're hired, man. Okay, because my generation can't do that. Digital storytelling is student-centered learning. It's all about ownership. This is not me saying, let me tell you about the Battle of Gettysburg. This is me saying, I want you to tell me about the Battle of Gettysburg through the point of view of a soldier on the Confederate side. Okay, now you've got a student that's got to figure out what was at stake for the Confederate soldier, what went on there, what's the voice? Is this a male? Is this a young guy? Is this a woman who's working on the front lines? What's going on there? Find that story and tell that story, and therefore you will own that content. Much better than me as a teacher saying, let me tell you what happened. Okay, much better. So student-led learning, student-centered learning, ownership, voice development, they create the curricular narratives. And then what's kind of the resonance of digital storytelling? It's storytelling. Okay, honestly, the highlight of all the previous speakers, the stories they told. There are a lot of bullet points and stuff like that, and we kind of take that in. But the moment you take those bullet points and bring it into a story, we're kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, if we can use storytelling as a mode, as a primary mode to educate kids, then they will make meaning of content. That's what stories do. Because I can't tell a story about anything unless I know that content really well. And digital storytelling kind of demands that you know that content really well. And that's what, as educators, we are all after. So, you can't really see this. So this is kind of like the thing about how wonderful digital storytelling is. You got it at the center. This is kind of how it connects, okay? Because you can do stories about yourself, about your identity, about your history and your background. There's all sorts of ways. But again, it's storytelling, so you've got to know stuff. It's digital literacy advancement. It's social emotional learning, because stories are only good if they've got a kind of an emotional connection to them. And it's student engagement. What you don't see here are all these wonderful skills: adaptability, resilience, creativity, imagination, persuasion, presentation confidence, iterative practices, storytelling. Up there is decision making. All those life skills that we want kids to kind of engender, to kind of absorb, are a part of this process. Because if you've got to tell that story about the Confederate soldier in the Gettysburg battle, think of the research you do. Think of all the decisions you need to make to put that story together, that little 3-minute story, to put that story together. All of the visualizations you've got to consider. All of, how am I going to use sound? How am I going to use music? How am I going to storyboard all of this? Who's writing the script? Who's voicing this? Am I going to do a Southern accent? Maybe not a good idea. You know, these are all the decisions that you need to make. And those involve all of these skill sets: critical thinking, problem solving, et cetera, et cetera. So what does this have to do with decision skills? What's the marriage I'm talking about here? It's like right here. A character is defined by the decisions that he, she, or they make. Okay, that's like where I went to school. I went to Kenyon College, and I was a theater major there, and that's the thing they like drummed into me as a theater major. A character is defined by the decisions they make. As we're studying theater, as we are acting, and guess what? History is full of historical figures making decisions. That's the story of history, the decisions historical figures make. Literature. You can study literature through the decisions key characters make. Science is a little bit more challenging, because science is about studying stuff that already exists. But look at climate change. Climate change is about the decisions we've made to, go into those kind of organic processes and how kind of screwed up things have gotten as a result. So the idea is that actually a lot of the traditional curricula can be broken down to a study of decisions. And digital storytelling is a process full of decisions. Decisions drive stories. So to me, it's like a perfect alignment. It's like it's all there. Okay, so you've got digital storytelling is about stories. The thing that makes stories is decisions. Decisions relate to curriculum organically. And so can we tell stories about history, about STEM, about literature, where we explicitly apply some of the decision-making rubrics that we've talked about, including the chain, in this room? And that's the goal here. Okay, and so that's the marriage I want to propose, that I think getting into the curriculum, going through traditional curricular venues, is a really viable way to bring decision-making to the fore as a lens through which to understand history, literature, and science. So, all well and good, Brett, but do you have any proof for this? It's funny you should ask, because I do. Okay, so I got together with Robin Gregory, and so Meridian Stories, nonprofit, based out of Maine, where I'm from. There are 15 challenges every year, 5 in STEAM, history, and language arts. Schools sign up, and so a challenge is, here's a passage from Edgar Allan Poe. Pick 3 words from this passage and create a horror scene in the style of Edgar Allan Poe. And so kids get together, and they collaborate, and they create this beautiful little horror scene, 4 minutes max, and they put it up on the website, and it gets judged and stuff like that. That's what Meridian Stories is. So we decided, let's try one with a decision sciences at its base. And it's called The Story of a Historical Decision. On your desk there is like a one-pager kind of describing the nature of the challenge and kind of a little bit of what's offered. And I want to show you a 4-minute, I'm going to end with this, a 4-minute video of a 7th grade class that responded to this challenge, talking about the Ottoman conquest. Now, as you're watching this, don't get too pulled into the story. I mean, do, of course, but be thinking of the education that went through for these kids to get to this place.
The Ottoman Empire was a power in Eastern Europe and Western Asia that had taken over the land that the former Roman Empire once controlled. But one city remained, Constantinople. The Ottomans that lay in front of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Mehmed II, Constantinople, or to wait and not attack. He chose the former. The consequences of attack on Constantinople still show today.
It all starts in a very documentary mode, very straightforward.
For many reasons. Constantinople was as much a symbolic prize as a strategic one. Constantinople was a symbol of Roman power and authority. Conquering the glorious and immense city will allow him to claim the title as heir of Rome.
Think of the research that went into this, the choices of visual images.
And fall of the Roman one, a new era. Constantinople also denied any expansion in the area due to the fact that before 1453, the city was thought to be invincible. They could from that point control trade in the Black Sea as well as trade between Asia and Europe. Trade both then and now was a big part of a country's economy, and Constantinople would give the Ottoman Empire control over the Silk Road.
My Sultan, you are dying. How do you wish to be remembered? Who were you, and why did you undertake such a risky and dangerous venture?
Dramatizing, adding a character.
And end the Roman Empire.
I think I have to tell you this.
That's Mehmed.
My father abdicated in 1442, which left me, then 12 years old, to rule the Ottoman Empire. This caused many European powers to join a crusade against my land. My father was urged to come back, but on his death, I ascended to the throne again, a second time, and immediately started strengthening the Ottomans' navy and planning how to capture...
They went into this character and gave him a voice and scripted him.
By the writings of Al-Kindi and Ibn Khaldun. Everything was being devoted to preparations for the conquest. My architects designed a new large cannon that would be used to crush the walls of the city. In 1453, I stood there, bravely with my troops, and personally led the final assault. It was a risky move, but I knew I would go down in history as the great Mehmed the Conqueror. The conquest left the door open for further expansion by further sultans.
In 1453, giant Ottoman cannons
Then they add animation.
the walls of Constantinople. The cannons took hours to reload, giving Byzantines time to repair any damage. The Sultan sent troops to assault the walls, however, they were...
Listen to how they've turned this into a story.
Cannons continued to fire throughout the day as assaults were attempted at night. At sea,
It's my
the
favorite
Ottoman
part.
fleet was unable to surpass the chained ships of Constantinople. But miraculously, the Ottoman ships were carried across land or around the defending ships, displaying the Sultan's genius.
They visualized the solution,
Crucial battle.
the way this happened.
Having to defend multiple sides, it weakened Constantinople's defense. The Ottoman military was far superior in numbers to the Byzantines. The city of Constantinople would fall in 53 days, and with it, the last of the great Roman Empire. When the impenetrable city fell, it sparked an age of discovery.
Listen to this.
A new phase of the Renaissance and years of conflict between the powers of Europe.
They make huge leaps here.
The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves across Europe. If it hadn't have happened, it would have led to a much later colonial period, with the New World being much less developed than it is today, and native tribes like the Aztec and Inca would have had a much larger influence. In general, the Eastern world would be much more advanced relative to the Western world. The fall of Constantinople and Byzantium would both greatly aid and eventually destroy the Ottoman Empire. The decision to invade Constantinople got the Sultan the name Mehmed the Conqueror. This event is marked as the start of the New Age and would ultimately lead
New York City.
to unimaginable changes to the world.
Okay, so, yeah, right? Okay, I just want to conclude by taking a decision sciences lens and approaching a historical topic. You yield so many levels of education. Take that versus like the 5-page paper about the Ottoman conquest. Okay, they decided that Mehmed the Conqueror, based on their research, really wanted his legacy out there, and so he made this bold decision. And they also came up with these kind of huge ramifications, which again, a little spacious, but that they were even thinking that way, 7th graders, is kind of unbelievable. So thank you very much.